Well, this is Baruch Fleischman. I'm back at the Tikkun Elevator Kollel, and we're coming here to read the words of Reb Yaakov Kronenberg, who wrote this tremendous book on Jewish astrology. Should be a landmark here, this book, and hopefully, you see how it's printed. It's in, it's not a person. There's a lot of people with great ideas to print books. They just don't have a lot of money. So they have to go to they want to get their books published. You have to go to the cheapest possible venue. And so here we have it's like a paperback. It's big. So yesterday we were talking about the spiritual path versus the material path. And the material path is going in the normal way that astrologers always work, is to work counterclockwise, like this. So that's the way the counterclockwise goes around this way. But the spiritual path, which has to do with really the happiness of a person, because there's different types of ways of looking at it, and his connection with something higher ideals is really going to be counted clockwise, like this. So that's what we saw yesterday. We started talking about how the first house fulfills itself in the fourth house if you see how the counting is going to go. I just showed it to you one more time. He says, doing clockwise, he says that the first house, which is Leo in this chart, go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and you see that this is the 10th house of this person's home. So you count another 10 houses, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and you got to the spouse. And then from the spouse, it'll bring you back to your career. So the most important thing in the spiritual realm is what he's saying is having a good house. The house that you're building, the family that you come from. And then you'll see how you found 10 houses away, you're going to find your spouse. And then once you have those two things, then you're going to see how it's going to work out. And I'm talking spiritually now in terms of spirit, how it's going to work out for you in your career. So you have to work those things together. Now here's what Rabbi Yaakov says. The more the husband and the wife are similar in their beliefs and attitudes, more successful in the marriage is likely to become. The more successful the marriage is likely to become. That is because men and women are very different from each other to begin with. So much so that the Talmud says it is almost a miracle to bring them together in marriage. And so if they also come from different cultures and backgrounds, different countries or different religions, it would make it much harder for them to be successful in having a proper and successful marriage. So in the more traditional cultures, they have the idea that the parents try to play a role in trying to choose life partners for their children. So sometimes they do the arrangements, and the future couple meets once or twice before the wedding, just to be sure that they are physically okay for each other, and then the marriage takes place. And today, you see that marriages which were made after long premarital relationships where people lived together in all different ways before they got married, these marriages are not really successful. He says they do not last so long. That's percentage-wise. We see the divorce rate in America is catastrophic. So I think there is something to be said in favor of arranged marriages. And you still see that. So the Indian people from India do it also. People who go to India and study the Indian culture and philosophy and stuff, they see that the Indians practice the way of arranged marriages too. So let's do a little bit more. So he says there are two ways of looking in one's horoscope, or birth charts. From the material way, from the first house you create the career, which is the 10th house. Or if you go in a more spiritual way, you decide to build your home first, and then the concept of making a good shidduch or match is in the 4th house. And if your career, the 10th house, and your home, 4th house are good, then what's going to happen here is you will attract a great life partner. So if your 10th house is good, you have money and a good career and power, you are likely to attract a great partner in the more physical sense. And if your 4th house is good, you're likely to have a very spiritual type of partner. And if both houses are good, your partner is likely to be good and successful in both ways, spiritually and in a physical sense, as the 4th house also influences the 7th house. So a good career and a good home cause a good partner. And depending on the partner, which is the 7th house, that would determine what kind of home you have. If you have a good partner, you would have a good home. But a bad partner will give you a hard time establishing a good home and a family. And so, if you want to really know if the family is good, you should look at the 7th house, which is the house of the marriage partner. Because the 1st house is of Adam, the man himself, and the 7th is of Eve. So if the Eve is good, the home will be good. This is the physical way. But in the spiritual way, we say that the man fulfills himself in establishing a proper home. That's really a place where the person could be happy in his home. So you see that it really works comparatively with the woman and the man. What for him is physical would be a spiritual task for her. And what is spiritual to him can be physical to her. I remember in my younger days, I used to learn in the yeshiva where someone paid me to learn with him. He didn't pay me well, but this is the way life is. And in the end of the month, he would always say, my spirituality is your physicality. My spirituality is to help your physical situation. In other words, you're helping me learn spirit, and so therefore I'm helping you by giving you a few dollars. He figured that spirituality and physicality should fulfill each other. So let's see a little bit more. So he says like this. So now we see the 7th house completes itself in the 4th house, as we have mentioned. So count 10 from the counterclockwise. From the 7th house, you'll get to the 4th house. If the husband and wife are good, it would make a good home. If you see that there are arguments and other problems in the house, or the children don't get along, you don't just look at the 4th house to solve this, and instead you see that the problem is solved 10 houses before or after that in the house of the man, the 1st house, and the woman, which is the 7th house. Now this will become more clear as he goes through the charts, the birth charts of Adam and Eve. Another point I would like to mention in astrology is that if a person has difficulty in finding a spouse, instead of using the material approach of helping him find a spouse by improving his career, so that's one way to do it, we go for the spiritual approach and help him improve his home life and not just his career. I remember trying to help someone who had problems in getting married. I told him, look at your genealogy. Maybe you come from a good rabbinic family because that will be your status in the eyes of the women, and that will improve your marriage chances. So you see, it is possible to solve people's problems not through psychology and mantras, but through the ancient wisdom which is embedded in the horoscope of Adam and Eve. Now let's see if we can do just a little bit more. He says the 4th house will fulfill itself in the 1st house. If the parents raise the kids properly, the child would grow all right. If there is a problem with the child, you go to the 4th house and try to see if there are problems with the parents, or maybe genetic problems. But for now, let's say that we are talking about the parents. Remember that every house has multiple meanings, and you can interpret everything that I say in different ways within the broad parameters of the various affairs of each house. You don't have to interpret everything the same way I am learning now. I am learning now, the way I'm learning now. But when something is wrong with a kid, let's say, for example, he's in trouble in school, people tend to blame the parents. I used to have a learning partner, and he was a professor of psychology in one of the universities in Israel. And he was a child psychologist, and he would tell me that you never treat a child unless the parents come with and were also treated. That is because the source of the problems that children have is almost always the parents. Or in a more spiritual way, if the person has problems, his career choice wasn't right, that is because the 10th house is the cause of the 1st house. That is, it supports, I guess you would say, the person himself. The direction a person goes through determines who he is. And if he goes off in a bad way, it would have a detrimental effect on who he is. If a person is not all right, it could be, at least in a spiritual way, because he didn't go in the right path during his lifetime. Maybe he went off to a different religion or a profession that didn't suit him, all sorts of kind of things, and that got him off the path. And that really determined who he is in a detrimental way. And this is what is called squaring the circle. Now, he talked about that before. Now, in astrology, when you go from the 1st house to to the 10th house. The 10th house is a square, what they call a square. In other words, it's 90 degrees away from that. That's opposition. So he says the first house and the 10th house are squared. The 10th house and the 7th house are also squared. And the 7th house and the 4th house are also squared. Squared in astrology means that there's opposition there. There's some tension. So the 1st, the 4th, the 7th, and the 10th houses, he says, each one being 90 degrees away from the other. So the 4 of them together make a square within a circle. So the circle itself is what's going on up above us, but in relationship to where the planets are when we were born, then you see that they're square to each other. So this is called in Jewish astrology squaring the circle. These are the main areas in life. These are the main angles of life, because these 90-degree angles determine the most important houses. And the signs and the angles are all the cardinal signs. On the first house, there is Aries. So this is the chart he's speaking now, the chart of Adam Arishon. On the 7th house is Libra, which is his mate, which is Eve, or Chava. On the 10th house is Capricorn. Capricorn is the businessman. And on the 4th house is Cancer. Cancer represents the home. So we'll see. We're going to be learning all of those things and trying to get more of an idea how this works. If you're able to generate, there's lots of places where you can generate a birth card. This one, let me see if I have it right here. This is called, I think you can see it here. It's called Astro Theme. So if you put Astro Theme in there, they're going to give you something that will allow you, if you know the time where you're born, time of your birth, this will give you an idea what your rising sign is or your ascendant. This is Baruch Fleischman, Tikkun Elevator Kolo.